Most people don't love their voice. Most people, when they listen to a recording of their voice, they're thinking, who is that person? Why do they sound so bad? And that's an awful place to be because all of us want to talk. We all want to share our ideas. But if we don't love our voice, that sort of stands in the way. And just having gone through the experience I did, prior to then, I was never thinking I want to be a vocal coach. But having gone through the experience I did, I can relate to how people are feeling. I can relate to the issues they have, not just the technical problems, but also what's going on in here. And when you really help people like that, it just changes their life so much. And it just is an experience that I, it's my way to help people.
Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. On this episode of Into the Unknown, I am joined with a very special guest, Paul Rakowicz. How are you doing today, Paul?
I am doing great. So glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule and to talk with me today.
I'm looking forward to it. I remember having you on my Leveraging Your Voice podcast, and you did a great job. And I learned about all the things that you do, and they're all so fun. So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, don't ask him what he does again. Don't get more info from him. I'm supposed to be the guest. So I'm going to try and be the guest today.
Paul, I appreciate that. It's funny you mentioned that because a lot of times when I jump on people's shows, it's kind of a switch you have to do when you start doing interviews and you start doing enough of them. You got to remember it's someone's show, and so you're trying to you have your brain going 1,000 miles an hour, but then sometimes I just got to think about what I have so many questions, and sometimes it's not the show.
I get it. I'm ready to answer. I'm ready to go.
I love talking about the importance of networking. How do we know each other?
Yeah, through networking, through a common group that we're in with Sean and Lacey.
They do an absolutely amazing job of not only educating, but creating that network, creating that collaboration. I just think it's so great to it's one thing to go meet people at, a cocktail party or some kind of networking event, but actually finding ways how you can help each other is amazing.
It is. And they ran that 52-week program where I got to meet a lot of people in the organization that I hadn't met before, and you're one of them. So I really enjoyed that. That was really nice, a nice sort of thing they did.
Paul, I want to know that comic book issue number 1, that origin story. Who are you?
Well, when you said comic book, I'm thinking, oh, he's going to ask me a question I don't know anything about because I don't know anything about comic books. All right, origin story. Well, as a vocal coach, I have a long career in business and IT, and most of that career is in executive management. And I had what I consider to be quite a tragedy. I lost my wife about 7 or 8 years ago. And when that happened, grief is a wonderful thing. God created grief so that we could get through such things. And grief really goes in and heals a broken heart. But grief is no fun. And when you're in grief, you kind of shut down a little bit because there's a lot going on and you just got to deal with all these emotions. And I did that. And I had in my mind, I wanted to make sure that I got through all the emotions so that this thing didn't stay with me because there's a lot of life left. And I'm lucky that we did that. But what happened to me was when I came out of all of that grief and got back into the world and started working, my body didn't turn all the way on. My voice didn't. I've been talking all my life. I always have considered talking my favorite sport. But I came out of this situation and all of a sudden I was losing my voice, like by lunchtime. This is a great tragedy because it's my favorite thing. So I started searching for why this was happening to me. And I found my coach, Roger Love, with whom I'm certified now. And Started doing all the vocal exercises, and they were doing good for me, but I still couldn't solve that problem all the way until I started to think about what's going on in my heart. And all of the grief had caused my body to shut my voice off because that would keep me from connecting with anyone deeply. And it would then keep me from ever losing anyone again. So, really, I had to change that story that I started telling myself and open myself up again and be vulnerable and be willing to accept that I may lose someone again if I get close to them, and that's okay. And when I started to change that story inside of me, then all the vocal coaching and the technical approach to using your voice well started to really kick in. And I got my voice back, and I was so happy. But in that process, I realized how deeply what we are telling ourselves impacts how we communicate with others. And so, having that experience, I wanted to go out and help others find their voice and be able to share what's on their inside with the outside world without the interference. And that whole experience is what drove me into vocal coaching for speakers. And that's how I got into this whole thing.
Paul, I appreciate that you mentioned that you allowed yourself to feel that range of emotions. I think sometimes in just how society projects, however it may be, that we're only allowed to feel this way or have this specific emotion for a short amount of time. And I think a lot of times we don't always unpack what's going on inside.
Yeah. Yeah. If we don't give ourselves the time to do that and really let those feelings are not fun, but you got to have them and you got to experience them. And when you do, you're free again. You can move on. And that's what I wanted to do is I wanted to be free to move on. We never forget wonderful 27 years and nothing bad to say, but there's more life ahead and going to go on living.
Paul, I appreciate that. So you mentioned you started kind of learning how to speak again, really. Or when did you transition into actually coaching people? It's one thing to be coached yourself, but starting to coach others.
Yeah, as I was going through that process and when I started to realize that vocal coaching for real is a lot about technical things, but it's about so much more. It's about the stories we tell ourselves, and it's about the narrative we create when we're working with others. So there's this three pronged approach that I sort of developed just to help my own self get through the problem. And what I wanted to do as I was doing that, it just came to me that I need to help other people do this because how many people love their voice? Not a lot. Most people don't love their voice. Most people, when they listen to a recording of their voice, they're thinking, who is that person? Why do they sound so bad? And that's an awful place to be because all of us want to talk. We all want to share our ideas. But if we don't love our voice, that sort of stands in the way. And just having gone through the experience I did, prior to then, I was never thinking I want to be a vocal coach. But having gone through the experience I did, I can relate to how people are feeling. I can relate to the issues they have, not just the technical problems, but also what's going on in here. And when you really help people like that, it just changes their life so much. And it just is an experience that I I just it's my way to help people.
Paul, I couldn't agree more. I think it's so important the stories we tell ourselves or that we don't like our voice. And I think throughout my career, I had to make that shift of from recording myself speaking when I was teaching to doing interviews, doing other things like that. It was one of those things that the first couple times I think I fell into the classic trope. Oh, I hate my voice. I don't like listening to my recording. But the more and more I started doing interviews and feeling more and more confident and comfortable, I was able to, I don't mind listening to my edits or for example. And it's one of those things I think I just had to change the internal narrative of what I was thinking because almost no one's thinking that outside of what's going on inside of my head, you know?
Yeah, we give ourselves a little grace and start to see what we're doing. And a lot of times when we listen to ourselves, we do find things that we could improve on. But now that we're listening, we improve on them. And as we do that, we start to get more comfortable with our voice and all these good things happen. So it's possible for anyone and everyone to love their voice, no matter what their situation is. I got to tell you, this is a story, a really powerful story. I worked with a gentleman, he was around 40 years old, had a stutter all his life. Now, he's a professional working in the IT world, but that stutter kept him from truly sharing his opinions, his mind, his thoughts. And it was something that had bothered him all his life. He saw an ad of mine and he said, "Well, I don't know if I believe that this will work, but I'm going to find out." So he gets on a call with me, and hard to believe that it'll work, but he says, "Yeah, I'm going to go forward." And he starts working with me. So we did his first lesson, went through everything. And then in his second lesson, and this is amazing, it's amazing to me. Second lesson, I'm working with him. And within 30 minutes, he didn't have a stutter anymore. And he's sitting there, he can't even believe it. And I'm excited for him. So we stopped the lesson and said, "Listen, just work with this, and then I'll see you next week. And let's let your wife determine whether you go backwards or stay with it, how it goes." Saw him the next week. He goes, "Man, I can't believe it. I don't stutter anymore." And it's amazing. This is why I do this, and this is why I got into it. Who wants to see somebody with that problem? And so that's just it's a really nice story about how powerful vocal coaching can be and how much it means to people to be able to share their message with the world and not have things interfering with that.
Paul, I couldn't agree more. I think it's so important. I tell my clients all the time, my podcasting clients, that we're going to record 6 episodes before we even release anything. We're also going to have you listen to those 6 episodes. And trust me, I know a lot of times it's going to be brutal for them, but it's one of those things we can see. Of course, when I ask them what they thought or what they saw or what they experienced, of course, a lot of times it posts more or leans more towards the negative.
Hmm.
Obviously there's always a silver lining in anyone and in any kind of situation. So I tell them, yeah, but you also did this well, or you really emphasized this, and that was a great idea. You drove home the story by the way you spoke. So it's one of those things of I appreciate you helping to instill confidence in others as well.
Yeah, that point you made there about, okay, we see all these bad things, but did you see any good things? Because I saw some good things, and you start to point some of those out. That's really important. Really
Have
important.
you,
One of the exercises I like to do is take a book of any choice, reader's choice, and pick a paragraph. And now read that paragraph as though you're a wonderful voiceover artist, and then record it and listen to it. And the first time you listen to it, you're not going to think, "Wow, that's a great voiceover artist." But then do it again, and you'll start to be able to play with the phrasing and the pitch and the pace and the melody and the tone and the volume, all those things, and create something that sounds good. And that's a great way for anybody who's listening today to just sit down and start to practice and start to get better with their voice.
Paul? I couldn't agree more. On everyone's journey, you can go east, you can go west. You take a path not really knowing the outcome. Can you give me a time in your life when you did that?
Well, well, there's so many, so I have to sit and think for a second. I'll tell you one. I spent a lot of my early years, all of my early years, working in very SMB type businesses, under 100 people, which I love, very entrepreneurial environment. And you learn so much because you do everything. So I spent a lot of time there. And then after 23 years, that whole concept sort of went away, and the business I was at went away. And I was stuck with a situation like you described. Which way am I going to go? How am I going to take my career? And I had a vision. I wanted to work at bigger companies because I spent so much time in the SMB world. I want to work my way up. But I found that Big companies wouldn't really be interested in hiring me because they didn't feel as though I knew the big company environment. So I started working at bigger companies until I had enough experience where now I could get into a very big company, a global company, a Fortune 10 company. And that's sort of the path I followed to get there. But that's an example. I don't know which way it's going to happen. I don't know how it's going to go, but there's a North Star there for me. Can I make my way there? And the things happened that got me there. So it was a good ending. But I think that's an idea of that kind of concept.
Paul, I appreciate that. I think it's one of those things where I always tell clients, people, students I work with, when you make the decision, you really don't know the other side of the coin. You really don't know what the other outcome would have been. I would love to, sometimes as a historian, I wish I could go back in time and kind of see what some of those events, unfold differently. If this general does this or this general does that. Of course, as a historian, I'm not a scientist where I can't test things in a lab. And so I kind of look at life a lot like that as well. Is you just kind of have to make your decision and I would say embrace what comes next.
It's what you got to do. I look at life as emergent, it's not predictable. We'd like to think it's predictable, but it's not. And it's emergent. And every day we have no idea what's going to happen. And if we learn to embrace that kind of emergent environment where change is the order of the day and everything that's happening, we got to flow along with time and understand all the different things that are happening and be open to turning here, turning there, going this way, going that way. And if we can embrace that kind of mindset, life becomes a lot easier. If we're stuck on, oh no, if tomorrow's not predictable, I'm going to be unhappy. We're always going to be unhappy. So just embracing the unpredictability of it all, the sometimes utter chaos of it all, and being okay with that, I think that is a really great way to live. And it's part of my coaching is helping people see life like that so that we're ready for anything all the time.
Paul, title of the podcast, Into the Unknown. Can you share with us what you're working on now? What do you have going on?
Well, I have a new book coming out. So I've written 4 books. They're all Christian books. And now I'm writing a book on vocal coaching. It's called, I got to think, Sounds of Impact: How to Speak with Confidence, Authenticity, and Purpose. That's the title of the book. So that's coming out soon. And what soon means before the middle of the year. So Q2, I think we'll get that book out. I've had some great people write up some nice little comments to put on the back cover and inside the book and things like that. So I'm excited about it. But that's something that's out there for me that will bring in a whole new unknown world, and we'll see what happens.
Paul, one thing you mentioned, authenticity. I think that is such an unlock for so many people, whether you're learning to speak, whether just, I think a lot of times just existing in the world. When you come to people authentically yourself and with authentic intentions, I think it just unlocks so many more doors.
Agreed. Agreed. And one of the things about being authentic is if we do it right, we allow people the freedom to be authentic back to us. And when we do that, we start to have deep conversations, not the surface level conversations we're all so used to, but deep conversations. I think that's a really powerful thing. One of the ways that comes out in my coaching is I always say to people, I don't want you to sound like me because the music in my heart that comes out through my voice isn't the music in your heart. So don't sound like me. Let's open you up and free you so that you can sound like you and you can share the music in your heart through your words and through your message. People like that. And it's better than saying, hey, do this, 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 and you'll sound just like me. I don't want that. I want them to find their own voice.
I think it's such a unique opportunity for people to really find themselves And that's why I love having just such a wide variety of guests on the show. Sometimes people are like, oh, I don't really have a story, or you've talked to someone like that. I'm like, but it's your story. And so going into the spirit of authenticity, it's sharing that from your perspective. No one has the same experience, especially in this format where you're talking about your own story, you know?
Yeah. And that goes into one of those things of that you and I have heard a lot in the coaching we get. We don't need to compete with everybody because even if we're doing the same thing, we're doing it totally differently. And we're going to serve different people, and different people are going to like one of us, and then a different person is going to like the other one. And neither's right or wrong, and neither makes either one of us right or wrong. It's just the way it is. And so just all that variety is a great thing.
I couldn't agree more. I tell people there's a big ocean, there's plenty of fish, there's multiple oceans, really. And it's one of those things where I think, especially if you're collaborating with people, even though we might be doing similar things, as you mentioned, it's with our own spin on it, which is going to attract our own, target audience.
Yeah, it is. I love the audience you get, Hall of Fame athletes. What the heck? How did that come? How did that unfold? But again, I don't want to ask the questions.
Life has its crazy things, and I always joke that it was pretty much ignorance, man. I just kept doing things I enjoyed, liking history classes, reading about sports, and was able to just kind of parlay and really not have a, I guess, sort of a goal in mind, but sort of just kind of doing the next, what I believe to be, again, you don't know the outcome, the next right thing. And so I always encourage people to kind of follow those curiosities and those interests and passions.
I do too. One of the questions I ask the folks that I'm coaching is when you come to love your voice, what are you going to do that you're afraid to do today? Let's just figure out. You don't even have to know, but I want you to think about what is that? What might that vision be? Let's have people thinking about that right up front.
It really is powerful. People want to learn more about your coaching. Where can they find you online, on social media? Where can people get a hold of you?
They can find me on all the social medias. The best way to get to me is on my website, prvocalcoaching.com. And if you go there, you'll see me there. You can see all the stuff about what I do. And then there's a little box up in the right, discovery call. If you want to chat with me one-on-one, just click that button. It's a free call, and we can talk deep about some of the issues that you might think you have. And if it's possible, for me to help you.
Well, Paul, I want to thank you again for taking the time to talk with me. It's always great to just, again, add that another level of networking, another level of getting to know each other.
Yeah, I appreciate you inviting me when you did. I was excited. I enjoyed having you in mind, and it was like, man, this is great. I want to do this. So thank you so much for inviting me. Really do appreciate it.
We'll talk soon.
Perfect.
That was another fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.